guys, it's Ollie. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. So I get DMs and comments on my snail videos all the time asking questions about snail keeping, and a lot of them are the same question. So I figured I would just put them all in one spot and do like a top 10 questions I get from new snail keepers. I will also be including a table of contents in the description below so you can see if there's a question in particular that you want to find. It'll be down there. I know you guys came here for snails, but I am joined here today with my new kitten, Simon. If you don't recognize this cat, it's probably because you didn't see my last video. It's all about this little guy and us getting him as a feral kitten and a vet visit to address a hole in his neck. So that's Simon. He's falling asleep. So he'll be in and out probably during this video. Also, sorry for the lighting. Yet again, I still don't have a ring light and it's nighttime, so the light's not coming through as well. It's gonna get real shadowy, I can already tell, and I am very sorry for that. So let's just go ahead and get right in the video and not waste any time. So number one, I get asked a lot more than I thought I would if people can wake up their snails to feed them. The answer is yes, but you don't have to. So I know a lot of people that do wake up their snails so they can feed them, especially if it's protein. I don't do that. Usually what I'll do is I will just give them a mist at night and put the food in. Now what I also do is I will take the snails and I will put them like on their food while they're sleeping. I do have a couple snails that I have to dig up in order to make sure they're eating because they just like to be buried a lot. So number two, I get asked a lot if it's okay to release snails into the wild, and if you guys watch my channel, you know that I am completely against most of the time releasing snails into the wild. Now if you caught it from outside and you had it for like a couple days, it's not that big of a deal. Put it back where you found it, especially if it hasn't interacted with other snails. You should be fine. Basically you just don't want to hurt the ecosystem by releasing it, and you don't want to introduce anything they may have picked up in captivity back into the wild. So while you can, if it's a couple of days, because I know some people do that, as long as they are solitary, it should be fine. But don't keep a snail for like a couple months or anything and then decide you don't want it and get rid of it. Just try to rehome it at that point because it's bad for the ecosystem to release it back to the wild. Same goes for captive hatched snails or captive laid eggs. It can just really mess with the ecosystem, especially if it's an invasive species. So low end of it, I mean, it depends, but most of the time, no, you shouldn't. So number three is a huge one that I get a lot, and that is enclosure size. What size should you have for your snails? Usually it is 1 gallon per snail, but you know, bigger is better with snails. They will use like every inch of what you give them. So number four is cleaning. So cleaning is an important subject and one that I'm happy people ask about. So you shouldn't deep clean like snail enclosures like you would for snakes or amphibians, because then you need to replace all the soil unless it's like bioactive. The reasoning behind this is that snails benefit from the healthy bacteria in old substrate. So in order for them to maintain a healthy gut biome, you actually do want some of that old substrate in there. Now you can occasionally, very occasionally, do like a 1/3 of a change. So get rid of like a third of the substrate and then replace it with something else. And then like mix it in to the old substrate. But overall, that's like a couple times a year maybe. You don't want to do any deep cleans because it can also shock your snail. Now you will want to spot clean your enclosure, so that could just mean, you know, you take some plain water, you wipe down the sides as needed, you mix the soil like maybe once a week to just freshen it up, and also search for eggs. You want to rinse off your Cuttle bone to just get all the muck off of it, and you just clean up any poop that you might see. But also you can get springtails ice pods and they'll take care of a lot of the waste. That's what spot cleaning kind of looks like for a snail, and you just do that as you see fit. Don't let it get too gross, of course, and that's pretty much all you really have to do for the cleanliness of your enclosure. So number five is how often should you mist your enclosure, and this varies. It varies on your species, it varies on your individual snail, and it can vary on where you live. So personally, I mist once or twice a day depending on the humidity at home. You do want to mist them at least once a day though, because they drink the water off of the glass, so you do want to at least do it once a day. If you do it once a day, I would suggest doing it in the evening around the time they would normally wake up, and it'll also wake them up and get them going. But in the winter, it gets very dry where I live, so usually I'll mist it twice a day. Just use your judgment. Number 7 is a quick one, and it's how many snails can you house together, and that entirely depends on the space you have to house them, because snails don't mind company, so you can house as many snails as you want to in the same enclosure as long as you have the room, which goes back to the gallon per snail rule. Alright, so the next one ties into that, and it's also short. Can you house different species of snails together? And the answer is most of the time yes. Of course, it's going to depend on the type of snails you have. So if their humidity and temps are around the same, which they should be, especially if they're native to your area, and if they're cannibalistic or not. You don't want to put like a rosy wolf snail, for example, in with a rather garden snail, because it'll eat your other garden snail. Same goes for slugs. Most of the time you can put the slugs in with your snails and it's fine. Just make sure you know the species and that they will not eat each other. The other typical rule is that you don't want to house a snail that's less than half the size of your biggest snail in the same enclosure as it, because they can accidentally crush the smaller ones. So the next one is one of my more common ones, and it is if you can use an alternative to Cuttle bone for calcium. So I use cuttlefish bone. A lot of people use cuttlefish bone. You can get it really cheap at Walmart, at your local pet store, in the bird section. It's pretty cheap, but some people don't use it, and that's fine too. So the two alternatives that a lot of people ask about are eggshells and reptile calcium. So eggshells, I've heard, I've never used them, can be okay. Again, feed it separately than the other food. I've also heard that they're a little bit lower in calcium than you might want, so I'm not as sure on that. But I've heard both ways. It's a little controversial, I think, in the snail community, but I've seen people do it. The other one is reptile calcium, and it strongly depends. If the reptile calcium has sodium, then obviously it's bad. If it's just plain calcium, it should be fine. But you don't want to put it on their food like you would a reptile. So how you would feed it is make them into calci cakes, and that's literally just you put it in water so that it kind of becomes like mushy, and then you let it cool, and then you pop it in the enclosure and it should be fine. But it kind of makes like a little solidified square kinda, so you shape it, you know, let it sit and then put it in. So that's how you make calci cakes. I've never used them before, but I've heard a lot of people using them. So the next question is, why does my snail burrow so much and stay under the ground throughout most of the day? Well, snails are nocturnal, so oftentimes they sleep. And some snails just like being buried. I have a couple of those myself that just like being underground. It's just part of them. Another reason could be because your humidity might be too low or too high. Oftentimes it's too low. Just kind of monitor your enclosure, see if you might need to maybe boost the humidity by misting more, or lower it by misting less, and just kind of go from there, see if that fixes the problem, and see if it maybe is a humidity issue. And if it's not and you can't seem to fix it, I mean, odds are if there's no other symptoms of anything and they seem healthy otherwise, then they just like to be burrowed. So of course, where it's a snail video, we're going to talk about poop. So the 10th and final question I get a lot are just overall poop concerns. So snails' poops are weird. They kind of poop out what we would consider to be a neck, and that's weird for people who aren't used to it. And they also poop different colors, which is very weird for people who aren't used to it. So your snail's poop is probably a different color because of what they ate. They don't really digest the dyes of their food, so if they eat lettuce, their poop's probably going to be green. If they eat a bunch of calcium, they're going to poop white. Their poop is going to be whatever color of the food that they most recently ate. And that's okay. And they will probably sit in their poop for a minute, and that's fine too. They're just weird little guys. So if your snail is like sitting in his poop, I mean, you can get it off with like a Q-tip or something, that's fine. But they'll rub it off eventually, so it's not too big of a deal. And snails will poop a lot, so if you're worried about the amount of poop, a lot of poop's normal. So that's pretty much it for this video, you guys. I really hope you enjoyed it. Sorry that I've been on and off on YouTube. I swear that I'm almost back in the swing of things. It's been very stressful. Let me know if you have any other questions about snails. I'll be happy to answer them to the best of my ability. You can just comment it down below, or you can DM me on Instagram, which will be linked in the description below, of course. My art Instagram, where I do custom pet pictures and soon other things, will also be in the description below. Don't forget to give this video a like for the algorithm and subscribe if you're into this kind of content. I post every single Friday at 3 p.m., but you can always hit the bell if you don't want to remember that. And as always, I will see you next week. Bye!